think Tevez going to Juventus, what a coup that was for me. I mean,
on a head-to-head battle, Atletico Madrid can do more damage to Barcelona than the other way around.
Either he's really blind or he's fixing the match. I can't see it any other way.
it is an upset. You would expect Man United to go and win there.
Over $1 billion was paid in transfer fees between the clubs in Europe.
And Bayern Munich are going to be favourites for me against anybody at home in the world. The 03-04 season, actually, Olympiacos have won 8 of the last 10 domestic league campaigns, so there is only really one team in Greece, which we kind of already knew.
Because things have been pretty much decided, just as a quick glance before we go through the table, PSG is going to lock up this thing with 1 more point. Monaco's solidly in second place. Lille is going to be in that Champions League qualifier position, 7 points ahead of Saint Etienne. If you're a serious talent, you're going back and you're playing for Santos. You're going back to play for, like in Argentina, for River Plate or Boca Juniors, or you're going to Europe.
He looked like the Ryan Giggs of old. He was more creative than any player on the pitch. He made Mata look stupid. He made Rooney look silly.
I am your host, Joe Usello. My trusted co-host, Ben the Machine. Ben, how are you tonight? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 30 of Low Limit Football on Low Limit Poker Radio. I am your host, Joe Usello, and tonight, as always, joining me, the best man in the business, Ben the Machine. Ben, how are you tonight?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm nice and fresh, and this is it's supposed to be my day off poker, but yeah, pretty much today. So it's been all football today, pretty much.
Yeah, well, we did put in that 6-hour session last week between the 3-hour show and then the 3-hour draft.
We did.
So that was a long night. So hopefully we'll keep it a little shorter than 6 hours this time around. But we've got a pretty good show for you tonight. Ben is almost like that transitional show for us. We're like a week outside of the World Cup. We are about 2 weeks or so after or post European leagues. We've got a couple little tidbits to clean up in terms of our coverage for 2013, 2014 in the different leagues. And then we're going to close it out tonight and move on to really 2014, 2015, starting after the World Cup. But before we hit the big dance in Brazil, you and I, we talked about what we should do in terms of, closing out the show. So we're going to talk about the teams that are coming up and the teams that are going down. We'll probably just, say goodbye to the teams going down. And then the teams that are coming up, we'll try to give you a little bit of a preview. Some leagues, Ben, as you and I discovered in our research this week, are not completely solidified in terms of what teams are going up and what teams are going down. I think, Ben, we found in La Liga, there's still a playoff to be done, if I'm not mistaken. There's also the same in Serie A. Obviously, the Premier League is all done. Ligue 1 is done, and then I'm going to trust you for the Bundesliga to let me know what we're waiting on for them. So that actually, Ben, why don't you get into it? Why don't you start us off in La Liga? Say goodbye to 3 teams and then give us who's coming up.
Yeah, we'll just get straight onto that. Just want to do a quick soundtrack just before we start. Was that better, Troy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm looking at it. It was probably just a little glitch. I might have been opening or closing a window or two here or there. So I'll close down a couple things. But right now the upload looks like it's pretty good. So why don't we roll with it, Ben?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I was just want to make sure people can hear me. We'll go on starting the Liga first. I'm going to do the teams relegated first and then the teams promoted. Just talk a little bit about them. As far as the teams that are relegated from the Liga to the Segunda Division, 3 teams: Real Betis, Real Valladolid, and Osasuna. Talk about Betis quickly first. In their last 8 games, Real Betis only won 1 and lost 7. So obviously terrible form going into those games, and no surprise they went down. They let in 78 goals and only actually achieved 25 points, which is a very poor total, and that's one of the reasons they went down. But ironically, even though they're letting that many goals, the centre-backs for the season did a bit of research for this to see how well they've been playing and where the weaknesses were in the team. And actually, the centre-backs were the best players of the season, so it shows to me a real lack of togetherness and a lack of quality throughout. As far as Valladolid and Osasuna, 4 points between Valladolid and 1 point between Osasuna and safety, and they were both in the mix, in fairness, for the whole of the season, for being safe, so they did only get squeezed out of it last couple of games. I do think that Valladolid and Osasuna will definitely be in the mix to come back, and I'd look for these two teams to bounce back straight away back into the Liga. As far as the teams promoted from Segunda, we had 2 teams promoted. This hasn't actually finished yet, so I'll tell you the 2 promoted teams and then I'll explain the playoff situation. But the 2 teams promoted was Eibar and Deportivo La Coruña. A lot of people know a little bit about Deportivo La Coruña, a big team, but I'll talk about them in a second. As far as the playoffs go, there's actually 1 game left, which is going to be played this weekend. As Joe said. As it stands, ironically, Barcelona B sat in 3rd, but due to the ruling that B teams must play at least 1 level below their main side, they're ineligible even for promotion, and they're also excluded from the Copa del Rey. But the teams in the mix for the playoff, you have Murcia, Sporting Gijon, Las Palmas, Cordoba, Recreativo Heleva, and CD Sabadell. Talk about the teams that have been promoted. Eibar first. The goals are absolutely split throughout the whole team, which you don't tend to see very often, but really, really split. Of the 5 strikers they have in their squad, they only scored 16 of the goals between the 5 strikers of the 48 goals that they've scored this season. So, like I said, really split. And their top scorer, ironically, was a midfielder, attacking midfielder, a guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, Joe. I've heard a little bit about him, but I must admit I did more research today. A guy by the name of Jota Pelletirio, and I went and looked on YouTube and I look at him, and this guy he's actually, he looks really, really decent. He looks like one for the future. He's only 23, and he's going to be their main outlet of creativity for me when they come back up. So maybe someone to watch, maybe someone we'll be talking about next season. But obviously for me, with the lack of goals that they've scored, the strikers have scored, even strikers is their main priority if they're going to have any shot of staying up. As far as Deportivo La Coruña, like I said before, this is a team that is a household name really in Spain. I mean, I definitely knew about them from the last 10, 15 years. They were in the Liga for 17 straight seasons between 91 and actually the 2010 and 2011 season, which was the season they got relegated, and they've been a yo-yo team since. They have 34,600 capacity stadium, which obviously is too big for the Segunda Division, and is definitely La Liga capabilities. And they've also got a really good training facilities there as well. And they are my favourites of any of the 3 that come up from Segunda to stay up. I think they're going to have a bigger pool during the transfer window, and obviously they have a bigger following. One last thing I'd like to just say about La Liga in general, just before we move on to the French division. I'll let Joe wrap it up. I had a look at this, Joe, and I did a research across all the teams in Europe, actually, all the leagues in Europe, sorry. And this is the closest division, the Segunda Division is the closest of any top 2-tier divisions in the whole of Europe. There's only 25 points between the team on bottom, Hercules, and the team that actually won the league, Eibar. Obviously, there's 1 game to go, but this is a 22-team league and only 25 points between bottom and top. So obviously, it's a very close division, and there's really not much between the teams that have gone up and the teams that have slightly missed out, Joe.
It's true that it's a pretty tight spread. It probably, obviously, with the amount of leagues we have to pay attention to, it would have been difficult to pay attention to them. But it's almost got a little bit of a Premier League flavor to it, sounding, listening to that point spread. Very tight race, top to bottom. What do you think?
Yeah, it has been. This to me, it amazes me that the team that finished absolutely rock bottom and have been relegated to the 3rd tier of Spanish football are only 25 points between the top team. I mean, you look at that for the Premier League, for argument's sake, and that could be the difference between 6th and top, and it is a lot of the time. So to have that in a 22-team league between bottom and top amazes me, and it just shows you that there's not going to be much of a gap in quality. But obviously the league doesn't lie, and the teams that deserve to go up have gone up. And what can Barcelona do, really? I mean, they've got a team that, not this season, but most seasons are thereabouts, and obviously their B team's crushing. Well, third, they've still got a decent chance of being there every single year. And I know their academy produces some brilliant players. Rachina came through for one. I know he's gone back off Blackburn and loaned back into Spain. That he went to Sociedad for a bit as well. So they've got a really good youth team there, and there's a lot to come from Barcelona in the future as well. And it's nice for people to be able to go and see the reserve team as well. But obviously that it's kind of a dead place in the division as well, because anyone that's finishing seventh is the equivalent of sixth. So it's an interesting division to look at, and I'll definitely pay more attention to it next season when we close towards the end to see if the race is exciting then as it has been this year.
Right. It's it's not. It brings to mind one word: parity. A lot of times we're looking for parity. We're looking for an evenness, top to bottom. Sometimes it can weaken a league, but in this case, it makes it more interesting because you just don't know where teams are going to end up moving forward. So, it's certainly going to be something to see. So moving forward, Ben, I'm going to move us into the Ligue 1 and Ligue 2 coverage for us. We're going to say goodbye to three teams to start. The first team we're going to start to say goodbye to is a team that we've actually started to say goodbye a long time ago, which was Ajaccio, who finished with 23 points in the league. The second team we're going to send off is going to be Valenciennes with 29 points and closed out with at least, as far as who scored goes back, at least 6 straight losses. And then the third team we'll sadly say goodbye to is Sochaux, who lost that last match against Evian. And when we talked about this at length for the last couple of weeks, where winner of that match was going to stay in Ligue 1 and the loser of that match was going down. So we're going to say goodbye to those three teams. Now, this is a league that, and I'm not sure Ligue 2 if they did a playoff or not. If they did, it fell right to form. But I believe they just tend to graduate 3 teams. So the first team I'm going to talk about is a team that won Ligue 2 last year, which was Metz. They finished with 76 points. This team had the best defense in Ligue 2. They've only given up 28 goals on the season. And that was, I'm just trying to take a quick peak here. So, and that was obviously 38 matches played. Only gave up 28 goals. Ben, that's virtually, Bayern Munich territory in terms of the goals against. If you remember that, we always marveled at the amount of goals Bayern didn't give up. And Metz did kind of the same thing and actually scored a nice clip of goals at 55 goals for 38 matches. So certainly, a decent side. They finished with 76 points, which was 11 points better than Lens in second place. So they've had this locked up for a few weeks. Just a couple of standouts that I found in researching Metz quickly. Their top goal scorers were Diafra Sakho from Cameroon, with 20 goals. And I didn't look to see if he is on the Cameroonian side for the World Cup. I didn't dig that deep on that one in particular. Second person I wanted to mention was their second leading goal scorer, which was Yeni Gabakoto, who was actually from France, and he scored 14 goals. As I had mentioned earlier, they'd given up only 28 goals, which was the best defense in Ligue 2. Johan Carrasco, who's a French goalkeeper, is their netminder, had 5 clean sheets in his last 10 matches and only gave up 7 goals in his last 10 matches, in the other 5 matches. So, Metz closing out with a couple of draws and 1 loss. The 1 loss that they had, Ben, was to Lens, who finished in second place with 65 points. Their top goal scorer was Johan Trosgar with 12 goals, followed by Pablo Cavaria from Argentina with 10 goals. And their goals were spread out. The majority of their goals, they'd only scored 58 goals on the season, but the majority of their goals were actually spread out amongst 5 players. So they did kind of spread it out a little bit. What I noticed was some of the other teams that I looked at were a little top-heavy on their goals, and Lens tended to spread it out a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see who they can hold on to on that side moving forward into Ligue 1, and to see what they do to upgrade to maintain that goal-scoring ability to keep them obviously afloat in the new league for them. The third team that I looked at, which finished 1 point behind Lens, was Caen, who finished with 64 points. They were the team that scored the most goals in League Two. They scored 65 goals in 38 matches. And the other interesting fact about that, like a side note to that fact, Ben, was that the top 10 goal scorers on the team, they were all from France, Ben. Whereas we saw a variety of internationals kind of mixed in for the other two teams. The top 10 goal scorers for Caen were all French. Their top scorers were Mathieu Duhamel with 23 goals in league, and their second goal scorer was Faikal Fajer with 8 goals, also from France, obviously. But they did have the 7th worst goals against in League Two, which would have put them mid-table. They had given up 44 goals in 38 matches, Ben. So moving forward, I'm looking at Caen as a team that's going to have to kind of strengthen that defense a little bit. It sounds like they've got no problem scoring goals. It's going to be an issue keeping them out on the long term, or else they'll never survive with the likes of the Monacos, the Saint Etiennes, and obviously the PSGs will just absolutely destroy them. So they're going to have to do something to shore that defense up moving forward. But again, looking at the spread top to bottom in this league, quite the distance between 20 teams. 24 points at the bottom, which was CA Bastia, and the top team in the league, which was Metz at 76 points. So there wasn't quite as much parity in this one as there was in the Segunda over in Spain, Ben. But why don't you move us over to the Bundesliga and let us know what you found out there?
Yep, we're going to have a look at the Bundesliga, the same as we did the Liga. It's a little bit different in the Bundesliga. We have you have 2 going up and 2 coming down, and then the third bottom team from the Bundesliga and the third top team from the Bundesliga 2 actually play a 2-leg playoff. We did actually cover this in one of our last shows, but I'll just recap it. That team that finished third bottom in the Bundesliga was Hamburg, and the team that finished third top in the Bundesliga 2 was Gruyere Fürth. And the game actually finished 1-1 on aggregate, Joe, and it actually ended up with Hamburg staying up on away goals, so it really was as close could be. But yeah, Hamburg stayed up, so we had 2 coming up and 2 coming down, which I'm just going to move on to now. The 2 teams relegated from the Bundesliga was Brunswick and Nuremberg. We'll talk a little bit about Brunswick first. They only actually won 6 games throughout the whole season, and only one of those was in the last 6, and they lost the other 5. Really, really poor form. Only scored 29 goals the whole season, which was the lowest in the division. And their top scorer, Kumbella, scored 9 of those goals, so nearly a third of the goals for the whole of the team. Which is worrying, really, and a bit of a worrying statistic that he only managed to have two shots on average per game, which he just wasn't getting enough of the ball. And look at their team, and there's a sheer lack of quality in midfield, and that's what cost them this season. And it's really going to be tough to bounce back without a lot of investment for me. As far as Nuremberg goes, they only actually won 5 games all season, and they let in 70 goals. In their last 12 games, winning 1 and losing 12, and any form like that is going to cost you dearly, especially in the top divisions in Europe. Ironically, for Nuremberg, during the German winter break, which we talked about a little bit in earlier on in the season, Joe, where we just skipped the German division for so long, it must be nice to have a month off in the middle of the year, middle of the season, even, sorry. But during that period, they actually had free friendlies, Joe, so using it to warm up and test the transfers out. But they actually won all those free friendlies. And then it just didn't improve their form, and they still lost 11 of their last 12 games, so it didn't quite work out for them. They only scored 37 goals. 17 of these goals was actually by Drumix, who it looks like he tried single-handedly to keep them up, but it just wasn't enough. I don't see him staying. I would be very surprised, and I think they're going to struggle to replace him. Sorry, where are we? As far as the defence goes, I look at the defenders and how they're playing throughout the season, and look at some of the reports. And for me, the defence is really not up to quality. I've seen some highlights of Nuremberg this season, actually, since I cover the Bundesliga every week, and the defence is a very low quality. It's definitely not Bundesliga standard, and I think this came through in the end. I mean, if you're going to be letting in 70 goals a season, you can't expect to stay in the division. And for me to bounce back, like I said, they need to keep Drumich. As far as the teams that were promoted to the Bundesliga from Bundesliga 2, Two teams, FC Cologne and SC Paderborn 07. FC Cologne, they are known as FC Köln as well. I did have a little look at this earlier on, and it did cause a little confusion at first, but just in case people are getting confused. But yeah, FC Cologne or FC Köln. Patrick Helm and Anthony Ujar scored 11 goals each of the 53 goals, with a lot of the midfielders chipping in on goals as well, so that it was spread throughout the team. No more so than from Marcel Risa, who I actually got a chance to look at a little bit last season. A really, really quick right winger who scored 9 goals as well. He looks lightning quick, a good crosser of the ball as well. So if they can keep hold of Risa, then they're definitely going to have a chance of staying in the Bundesliga next season for me. A little bit about the history. Since the turn of the century, Cologne's been a yo-yo team, a bit like West Brom used to be in the Premier League, up and down and up and down. It's been like that for the last 12 to 13 seasons. But Cologne's a big name in Germany. We see this going up and down, like I said about Deportivo La Coruña in Spain. They're kind of the same here for Cologne. And I do think that that's going to give them a bit more pull when the window comes, because they're a big name in Germany. And I actually did do research on this capacity. I knew they had a big ground, Joe, but I didn't know that their capacity, remembering that they were in Bundesliga 2 this year, they had a 50,000, well, they do have still a 50,000 seat capacity stadium, Joe, and they was playing in Bundesliga 2. So that's interesting. I would be interested for anyone that wants to go away, or if anyone knows in the chat, you can impress me what their average attendance was last year. Oh. But to have a 50,000 capacity stadium, you belong in the Bundesliga for me. And this is going to help with the poll as well, because for me that stadium's been built. There's a strong fan base there, and hopefully they can stay up this time. It does seem almost inconceivable that a team of this stature wouldn't be playing top flight football. Mm-hmm. As far as the other team to go up, SC Paderborn 07, they actually leaked a lot of goals this season. Defence was definitely not their strong point. 48 goals, which is strange to see on a team that's been promoted to leak this many goals. But this should be something for them to look at in the close season. If you're letting in 48 goals in the Bundesliga 2, and you're scoring that many goals, it says to me, if you're going to let this many goals in, you're going to go up. And once you start playing against the Munichs and the Leverkusens in this kind of division, especially teams like Munich that are beating teams 6-7-0, you're really going to struggle. So they're going to need to go out on the window, and they're going to have to buy some defenders. But looking at the positives, it's not, obviously they've gone up. I don't want to stand there and slate them, shall we say. But Mahir Saglik scored 15 in 18 starts. He looks like a player. He really does look like the player that he was supposed to be when he was younger. I do remember him playing for the under-20s in Turkey. I actually did see him years and years ago. I recognised the name, so I come back and looked at him. But at the time, he was touted to be the next star for Turkey, and it kind of fell apart for him. But this season, he seems to have really got his scoring boots on. He looked really, really good, and he's a standout player for me. If they can keep him, then he's got every chance of staying up. And the other player I wanted to talk about was Alban Meher. He's had a great career at Paderborn, really. He scored another 12 this season as a backup striker. He's done really, really well. And he scored 23 in 84 games since joining, and also 2 in 6 for Albania. I actually had a little look, and I've seen some of the YouTube clips on him, because he has been touted, Joe, as the I don't know if you remember Juninho, the little Brazilian, actually played for Middlesbrough. Sure. But they were comparing him to Juninho from Middlesbrough, so I had a look at all his free kicks. Anyone that wants to go and have a look at a good dead ball specialist from the lower leagues, if you type in the name, I'll spell it out for you. It's Alban, Alban, and Meher, which is Meha. But he's a real good dead ball specialist. Someone coming out of these kind of leagues, and it's absolutely key for them to stay up that they keep him, because he was everything that they did that was right this season came through him. And also the coach, Andre Bretemer, it's a bit up in the air whether he's going to remain with the club. It's a bit of a fairy tale story for them, really. This team, SC Paderborn, who I must admit before today I didn't really know too much about. They're a bit of it's a real fairy tale story. They were actually in the third tier in the 08-09 season. So he's done a really good job since he's come along here, and Brighton Wright staying for me is another key for them them to stay up and give them a glimmer of survival.
Sure.
I don't know if you want to go out to the. Am I still cutting out, or is it okay?
No, we're clean. We're running good.
Okay.
Audio's been excellent.
Yeah, it's like I said, they need to keep the coach there because he's done a great job there, especially if they're going to go up into a division with the top end quality that they've said. We've been talking about Germany a lot this year, and the teams even as low as 5th and 6th have ran about and gave us some decent story points to talk about on the show this season. So there's a lot of strength in the top division for the smaller teams coming up to deal with, and you need a really decent coach and you need to keep hold of your best players. So hopefully they have a good season next season.
Let me ask you this, Ben. Obviously we've gone through 3 leagues here so far. We've got Serie A and the Premier League to go. If you had to look at these teams and decide, it's a one and done season where they're coming up, for example, like a Cardiff this year, okay, where they came up one season and they're going back down. Not to preview the Premier League, but what's the key to staying once you're promoted? What do you feel like the key to staying is?
I think it's a bit of a mix of everything for me. I think the players that really, really excelled, obviously I'm going to talk when we go to the Premier League about a couple of the teams that have come up, and as much as it pains me, and I'm sure Bob will know when we come across it, these kind of teams remind me a bit of Burnley. Burnley's another fairy tale story, but the reason it pains me is because they're Blackburn's rivals. But they, to me, showed you what you need to get out of the division and to stay in. Once you go up, you need to keep your very, very best players, the players that really, really excelled. You can't let them go no matter what clubs come in, really. And if they do, and there's a contract, I can't think of the word, a clause, sorry, in the contract that lets them go, that money just needs to be reinvested straight away. It has to be. You can't pocket that and come back because you're never really going to stand a chance in these divisions. The manager needs to have all the players on side. I just think you have to come together as a unit and really, really battle. I think the teams that go down more often than not, they don't come together as a unit quick enough during the season, and I think that's what costs them. And because there's going to be real tough times. You have to realise these teams throughout all of the divisions, you're going to have times in the season where you lose 7-8 games on the spin, or you might only get a couple of points from those. Maybe only one win in your first 10 games, and you can't let your head go down. You need a decent coach and decent people behind the scenes, as well as a decent manager to just calm everybody down and bring you back to that positive of what it was last season, and use that going forward as a motivation to prove the quality that you have, as a club.
I agree. I almost want to say it a different way. Is stability. The ability to kind of maintain stability in the front office, stability with your head coach, stability with your training staff, and stability with your team. Obviously introducing the parts that you feel you need moving forward. For example, we've talked about some of these teams that need to kind of shore up the defense a little bit. Introducing those parts with the money that you're going to have, the newfound money that you're going to have, but then maybe taking it one game at a time, and until you get 6, 8, 10 games under your belt. Just maintaining that semblance of stability and the ability to kind of say, okay, we're going to take this one step at a time, and then after 5 or 6 games, let's see where we are. We could be top of the table, we could be dead bottom, and we could be mid-table and 2 points out of a Europa position. So I think the key though is maintaining some sense of stability, moving forward into the new league, and then building on that from there.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's move over to Italy. Let's talk about Italy real quick. The 3 teams we're going to say goodbye to in Italy, and Italy's going to be one of these places where we have a playoff that's still in process. So I've really only got 2 teams to semi-preview for you, and then we're going to talk about a playoff. So saying goodbye, Livorno, 25 points, Bologna, 29 points, and then Catania, who ended up finishing, I believe it was 2 points out of staying up. So I personally think, Catania did have a rough season, 8 wins, 8 draws, 22 losses. That's pretty significant. The only team to lose more matches than them was Livorno. Bologna tried to do it by way of the draw. They had 14 draws to close the season, but, certainly not enough. Now, Livorno closed out with their their last 6 matches were all losses, and Catania really made a go of it, winning 4 of their last 5, but losses in the end to whoever you want to blame it on. A 1-0 loss to AC Milan or a 4-0 loss to Verona really kind of did them in. So let's look at the newcomers, or at least 2 of the newcomers coming into the Serie B, from the Serie B to the Serie A. And this is something that I had a quick little discussion with my brother, because we're both of Sicilian heritage, and he was a little upset that Catania was, kind of leaving and losing that Sicilian position in the Serie A. But he'll be happy to know that Palermo did win the Serie B, so they really just spent 1 year down in Serie B, but finished on 86 points in 42 matches. Only gave up 28 goals, Ben. 28 goals in 42 matches. You're like, what, 3/4 of a goal? I mean, again, we're talking about we're talking Bayern Munich's position kind of there with only 28 goals given up. So they were the best goals against in Serie B with 28 goals. They were the second best in goals scored with 62 points, with 62 goals. Only Modena scored more goals at 65. The goal-scoring leaders for Palermo were Abel Hernandez from Uruguay with 14 goals and Kyle Lafferty from England with 11 goals. So looking at them moving back in, and it's good to see that with Italy, obviously it's a nation of a couple of islands with Sardinia as well, and we had Sassuolo stay up from Sardinia, so it's kind of nice, and Cagliari as well. So it's kind of nice to see Sicily be represented there. The second team in second place was Empoli at 72 points. Their goal-scoring leaders were Francesco Tavano from Italy at 22 goals and Massimo Maccaroni with 15 goals. And again, Ben, just like we had talked about earlier with Lens, where I'm sorry, it wasn't Lens, it was Cannes, who their top 10 goal scorers were all from France. On Empoli, 8 of the top 10 goal scorers were Italian. The only 2 non-Italians in the top 10 for goal scoring for Empoli were Levan Miklidze from England with 2 goals, and Elsed Hayaj from Albania with a goal, and he was the 10th goal scorer for the team. So again, Empoli kind of keeping it in the Italian heritage moving forward there. The third team is still to be decided, Ben. We have a playoff coming up on Tuesday, which obviously tomorrow. We have 7th place Crotone at home facing 6th place Bari, and we have 5th place Modena playing 8th place Spezia. And one of the winners will go on to play Cesena, who was in 4th place, and the other team will go on to play Latina, I believe it was, Latina, who finished in 3rd place in the Serie A. So.
Sorry, Joe. That's a crazy playoff system to have 2 promoted teams and then 6 playoff places. There's a lot to play for in Serie B. It looks like
there is, and I feel actually bad just looking at the standings here. I feel bad for Siena, who was once a Serie A mainstay. They finished 1 point outside of that playoff position at 61 points.
Do you know just what we were saying about saying the top 8 goal scorers out of the 10 are Italian, and like you said before in the French, the top 10 goal scorers are French. And if you we'll talk a little bit about the Championship later, but the same kind of thing. A lot of the goal scorers, the top goal scorers from the whole division in England as well are English. I think it just finds that these second tiers in these different European countries, it does seem to be a lot of all the homegrown talent, and I think that's where a lot of the managers are now having to look at this kind of division for the homegrown talent, because it's being pushed out by the better players in the world. And now, obviously the financial fair play is coming in, but it does seem like now people are buying their way out of trouble rather than trying to build it out through their academy. So I don't think it's too surprising that you see a lot of domestic players in the second tier making headlines. It's nice now that they're bringing in rules that you have to have some homegrown talent, because otherwise, like we're going to see in the World Cup, you're going to see a lot of countries suffer because they're not fielding enough homegrown talent in their domestic leagues in the top division.
That's true. I'm also a big fan of and SirBob, I'm going to get to what you said in the chat in a second. I'm a big fan of integrating quality players from other countries. So, for example, here in the United States, we have the MLS, and we've seen an influx of foreign players coming in. But what I'm afraid of seeing, and this is something I'm going to touch on in MLS because we're going to talk about a couple of transfers that happened over the past couple of days. You don't want to see terrible talent, Ben. You don't want to see weaker talent. You don't want to see people retire to your league. You want to see people come in that can make a difference, that can force a hand. Example in Italy, like they did with the strikers in Fernando Llorente and Carlos Tevez. Look at the top goal scorer in England, Luis Suarez. Even in Spain, the top two players in Spain are Argentinian and Portuguese.
This is sorry to interrupt you. This is the problem. I mean, they actually said that the English players were being paid too much, and this was the reason why there's so. The statistics, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I know the English Premier League has got the highest amount of foreigners from any domestic league in Europe, and this was mainly because the English players were demanding too much wages, so they were going abroad to find someone of the same level of talent, should we say, similar kind of age, that would come in on a wage that's less, so they're cutting their wage bill down rather than taking domestic talents. And this is when it becomes a business over talent situation, business over what's right for the country. And obviously the people that financially run clubs, they're running it as a business, and if you can do something of a high quality standard for cheaper, then you will. So you can't really blame them for taking the cheaper option, but that's definitely for me why the English league is chock full of foreign players.
Yeah. Just to kind of sidetrack you a little bit, I know earlier in the chat they'd asked me to talk about a couple of transfers that happened, Ben, and I certainly want your opinion on them. So one thing that's not in our agenda tonight is we are going to talk about a couple of transfers that happened, but we'll talk about them in MLS when we get to that spot. So why don't you take us into the Premier League and the Championship, and Ben, I don't know if you want to try here introducing what will become a new segment for us coming in the near future.
Yes. This is the bit I've been waiting for really, but obviously the English league's close to my heart. But yeah, we'll go through it. We're going to talk about the teams relegated first. I know Bob put in the chat he feels that if Houghton stayed at Norwich, they would have stayed up. I'm inclined to agree. Really, I don't see what was gained from sacking Houghton.
I want to add that I think it's close, but I think they would have been better off staying with Houghton than getting rid of him in that spot. I also think that their schedule was, I don't want to say impossible, but definitely improbable to close the season out.
That's the thing. I think that you shouldn't make a change if it's not beneficial, and I felt like Bob felt that there was no benefit for them changing the manager at that stage of the season. This was a guy that brought them up and a guy that knew the team, so it's beyond me why they did that. But
stability.
Anyway,
we talked about stability.
This is it. If as a player with a manager, you're looking up to that person. With a new person coming in, you've got teething problems, regardless of who you are. And most of the time, you might get a small little boost for a couple of games where it's a new manager, everyone's trying to impress. But in general, stability and knowing what you're coming to do every day, to train, to go forward, someone to go to when you need them. This kind of figure in a club is, like Joe said, it's the stability that teams need, and it's the only real way you improve as a club. I think Manchester United are the biggest advocates of that. They didn't, Alex Ferguson was there for 20 years. He came in when the club was bottom of the top division, and they stayed and they built stability upon that. That's why, But anyway, we'll talk about the teams relegated before we go too far off track. Firstly, I'll talk about Cardiff, Vincent Tan's men. They only actually won 7 games all season and let in a whopping 74 goals, Joe. One of the key statistics and the main reason they went down, the last 15 games of the season, they only won 2 and drew 3. So not picking up enough points there.
But
and
just to cut you off a little bit, I want to add, deep down inside, just because of who Vincent Tan is and just the way he was and what he did to this team over the year, I think we were all kind of secretly hoping that this would happen.
Oh, no doubt. I think that everyone had no idea what was going on at Cardiff. It seems like an absolute farce there. The fans, changing the top, the badge. even trying to change the name, this was silly. Another thing for me, I mean, I'm not against Wales like per se, but having Welsh teams in the Premier League as well seems a bit strange because it is the English Premier League. But anyway, we digress. But yeah, this team was really, really poor throughout. But there was a lot of surprises for me as well in Cardiff. But put aside the fact that the owner of the club just went nuts, and Malcolm Mackay was sacked for me. It was inconceivable. There was no reason to do that. He brought Cardiff up as the best team last year, and that year that they went up, obviously I was seeing the Cardiff results every week because as a Blackburn fan, you're seeing them there, and they was just unstoppable last season, Cardiff. But there was an absolute skeleton of a team this year. I know the difference in quality is high when you go from the Championship to the Premier League, but still, this was they was like a shell of a team, really. And quite surprisingly for me, top scorer was Jordan Much, and he only scored 7 goals. It's not, if you're going to stay up when you're coming up as a team like that, you need someone to stand up and take the brunt. For me, this is why the teams, when they come up, when I talk about them in a minute, I'm gonna mention the striker that they're going to need to get the goals from to have a chance. This for me didn't happen here. Much only scored 7, like I said. Generally poor in every position, really. Real disappointing displays for me from Craig Bellamy. As an old Blackburn player, you've seen him at Wales. I mean, Craig Bellamy is class. He's really, really a really good player. For me, if he didn't have so much of an attitude, he really would have set, for me, the Premier League. You would have known his name. He would have been a household name. He could have easily played European football for me. If he'd have really tried, maybe even into Champions League, he was a really, really good player, and he didn't quite have the attitude for that. But anyway, he surprised me because he had talent, and he didn't really do too much this season. And another one for me that's surprising, the Man United man, the Crystal Palace man, was Zaha. He was brought in, an exciting young talent. Everyone was expecting a lot to come from him. I did think that Cardiff, I thought he was going to be the standout player for them. I thought, he was by far and away the most creative player, but he didn't really achieve. And that, for me, those two things, along with all the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, really, really cost him. And to compound it and make it worse, Bellamy's now retired. And with Vincent Tan changing so much and a lack of stability that we're gonna pun as a word, Joe, at the club, I don't think anyone at Cardiff knows whether they're coming or going. Really, I can't imagine the fans are too happy with what's going on there. I don't think they're really that impressed with the manager there, obviously behind the scenes. And for me, something needs to change there. They need to firstly sit Zaha down, sit him down, and try and motivate him back up to the level. Talk to him, get him back to the level he was when he was playing for Crystal Palace. He set the Championship alight, and if he can do that, then and Vincent Tan makes up for all this craziness and chucks a bucket load of money at Cardiff, which I wouldn't be that surprised if that happened. Then they've got a decent chance of coming back up, but they need to sort a lot out in the summer for that to happen. Secondly, we'll go on to Fulham, the other team that went down. We talked about them a few times this year, Joe. I guess we had a little bit of a sweet spot for Fulham. I don't know why. They're just a team that are quite likeable for me. But they let in 85 goals this season. I'm sorry, but if any Premier League teams lets in 85 goals, that's it. No team of this level should be able to do that. That for me kind of reminds me of the Derby team that came up and broke the record, only 10 points. But yeah, they these 85 goals, by far the most in the Premier League this season. The whole team was poor once again, like Cardiff. A couple of players that I would say possibly I can't put into that bracket. It's a bit harsh to say that. I wouldn't say they excelled, but they were definitely Fulham's best players for me. Sidwell and Parker in the middle of the pitch. Will they stay? I don't think so. I think they're Premier League players and they should leave. And Holtby and Amrabrito were okay, and for me, they need to keep as many of those players as they can. I don't think they will, but if they can, then they've got a chance going forward next year. Obviously, there's a lot of money at Fulham. like there is at Cardiff, and if they go out and they spend a lot of money in the close season and maybe keep hold of Steve Sidwell as well, because I do think that people are going to come in for him, then they're going to have a chance to come back up next season. But I do think one thing that definitely cost them this year, although I don't think it would have made a difference with the 85 goals that have been let in, was Darren Bent staying fit. I do think that he would make a major difference, and certainly in the Championship, but in the Premier League too. Darren Bent's shown, even at international levels, that he'll score goals for you. So they need to do that, and possibly a new goalkeeper as well if they're going to go forward and try and come back up on the first try. The last team, the team that Bob's been talking about in the chat as well, Norwich. Of the last 25 games, Joe, they only won 3. If you're going to only win 3 of your last 25 games, or all the games after your first 13, whichever way you want to look at it, if you're only going to win 3 of those games and you can't close games out, then you're going to go down automatically.
Right.
Lack of goals for me was the problem at Norwich. You can see it. I mean, they only scored 28 goals all season. You can't only score that many goals. You cannot be scoring less than 1 goal a league in the Premier League. Snodgrass only scored 6 goals. Hooper only scored 6 goals, and that made up nearly 50% of the team's total goals.
I think they expected a lot more out of Van Wolfswinkel.
I think they did. I mean, for me, they brought him in. They expected him to score goals as well, and he didn't turn out to be the player they thought he was going to be. And then, the players that have chipped in, no one's really, like I said, these teams coming up. You'll find the teams that come up 90% of the time and stay up are the teams that someone comes out and they really, they've got a striker that can score 15 goals plus. You need that. You do need that kind, because it just takes so much pressure off the team if you've got someone that can convert these chances, because as a defender or a goalkeeper, I mean, I know Joe plays up front, but I play in goal. It takes so much pressure off everyone else in the team if you know that at any moment during the game your striker can get hold of a ball and do something that's different, that's quality, that doesn't even have to be world class, but class, that can make a difference in the game and give you a chance. So if you're only 1 goal behind at any point during a match, you've got a chance of taking it away, or if you're drawing at any point during a match. I just don't think they had that, which was unfortunate for me, because ironically the defence and the goalkeeper for Norwich this year were actually quite good. I don't think that their defence and goalkeeper were bottom 3 material. I just think they just could not score goals. There was no creativity, lack of finishing, and it was the midfield and the strikers that cost them here. But you can't help but think they do need to keep hold of Snodgrass during the window. I do think he's a decent striker, definitely a decent Championship striker, and he'll score goals. But they need to go out in the window for me and sign at least another striker, possibly 2. As far as the teams coming up, we're going to talk about these. We'll talk about them a little bit in detail, just because I see them in week out, because obviously the Championship is the league I follow with my my team that unfortunately I'm not going to talk about in the teams being promoted, but hopefully next season. Anyway, the teams that went up, Leicester went up as Championship winners, Burnley in second place automatically, and Queen's Park Rangers via the playoffs. Firstly, Leicester actually a big club, over a 32,000 capacity stadium, and they really looked the true class of the Championship this year. Scored 83 goals this season. Their top scorer, David Nugent, 20 goals. Second scorer, Jamie Vardy, scoring 16. If your 2 strikers are going to chip in with that many goals, you're going to be a threat to anybody. But for me, ironically, the player that stood out was Danny Drinkwater in the centre of the field. Looks Premier League quality. He will stay in the Premier League for me, regardless of whether Leicester do. A couple of special mentions as well. Wes Morgan plays centre back. He was very solid this year, and I think he'll be able to handle the Premier League. And of course, Kasper Schmeichel, who people know about, Peter Schmeichel's son. He had a decent season as well. I do think he's Premier League quality. But they have spent the last 5 seasons in the Championship, which I must admit was quite surprising for me. A bit like Blackburn, they're kind of a big small club, so I do think that they do deserve to be there. But they've been in the Premier League before, and so this won't be that new to them, and they'll know what it takes to stay up. Just whether they can achieve it is what they need it is what they need, really. But for me, they do need a lot of players still. I do think, once again, these teams going up, they have to invest. If you've won the league and you've got this money coming in, they're going to get this money from the television deals. And I don't believe that any of their players are on, should we say, like ridiculous wages. So I do think they need to take that money and they need to go out, buy a couple of defenders and possibly a couple of midfielders and at least one more striker. Because although David Nugent led the scoring this year, the last time David Nugent was in the Premier League with Portsmouth, he definitely, you could see the step up was too much for him. He didn't have the ability to go past defenders in the Premier League like he did in the Championship, and they were just, the main difference for me between the Championship and the Premier League is the lack of mistakes. Defenders are a lot more clued up and positionally aware, and I don't think David Nugent, he didn't, what he was getting given, he was getting scraps that he shouldn't be getting in the Championship, and he didn't get those in the Premier League, and it really showed, and he only scored 2 or 3 goals. So they need to go out and buy a striker for me. We'll go to Burnley now. Like I said, this is Blackburn's big rival, so if I don't sound too interested, don't be too worried about it. But
do your best to get through them.
I'm going to do this. I mean, I must admit, you have to understand, I hear about this every single day from Burnley. Although I don't live too near to Blackburn, I'm a big glory hunter, so you can come find me on Twitter. But yeah, Burnley, a very, very small town from Lancashire. I mean, Blackburn are a small town from Lancashire, but Burnley are a small town next to Blackburn. So this is how small this team really is. Absolute fairy tale story. They've been in the shadows of Blackburn Rovers for years. This is my show, so I had to mention that. But it's, like I said, it's a true outstanding underdog story. No money, a real little support. You've got Liverpool, you've got Manchester United, Manchester City, Everton in this area. And then even if you do come from Lancashire, Blackburn are the biggest team in Lancashire. So for me, there's no pool there, no money. And on top of all of that, they sold their best striker, who scored 22 goals last season, I believe, who went to QPR, Charlie Austin. So nobody saw this. I believe that they were 18 or 20 to 1 to be promoted or something, not to be promoted, sorry, to win the league. I think their promotion chances was like 9 to 1 or 8 to 1. They were actually bigger favourites to be relegated than they were to be promoted. So, like I said, it was crazy that it happened. The main difference for me, and the reason why you're going to see Burnley in the Premier League this year, is a certain Sean Dyche. For me, a manager that it's inconceivable what he's done with no money and barely a youth system. He's playing players out of position, but he's got the absolute most out of every single player on that team. They call him the Ginger Mourinho, and you can kind of understand why. He's done something out of nothing, really. 3 standout players that I'm going to mention for him that you can watch out for next season. Kieran Trippier, the right back, plays for England under 21s. Really good full-back. Up and down the pitch, he's a good tackler as well, good crosser of the ball, quite good dead ball as well. He's definitely Premiership class, and once again, I think he's a player that will stay even if Burnley don't. Scott Arfield on the right wing. Same again for me, really. Tracks back quite well, good crosser of the ball. And the player you'll be hearing a lot about next season in the Premier League, either because he's left and gone to a bigger club or because he's bursting over the back of defenders, is Danny Ings for Burnley. A few people were saying, should he have been in an England squad? I don't think so, but he is class. 26 goals this season, only finished second to Ross McCormack, who basically is Leeds United. There was no one else scoring goals there, but real class, as much as it pains me to say it. And these 3 in the manager is the only shot that Burnley have, because there's no money there at all. And just to give you an idea of what the bookies think about Burnley, they're 7 to 4 on, so you've got to put £7 on to win 4, with the bookies to go down next season. So obviously they don't have much faith. The last team that came up from the playoffs, Queen's Park Rangers. They beat Derby 1-0 in the playoff final. They were actually expected to storm the Championship this year. They've got more money. Well, they have actually got more money than the whole of the Championship had combined. They spent more than the whole of the Championship put together. Tony Fernandes just splashes the cash, a bit like the Manchester City of the Championship, really. And for them, to not only not win the league but finish 5th in the league and scrape through 1-0 in a playoff final, for me it has to be counted as a poor season for them. But they're up and they've done it, and I'm sure they're going to rebuild. But like I said, pretty poor. Only really one standout player for me, and that was Charlie Austin, who I just spoke about. And he scores goals for fun at championship level, and he's going to be tested whether he can do it in the Premier League. But he is class, and I would expect him to get 10-12 goals for QPR next season. I do think they need to bring in a few players, but like I said, Tony Fernandes is going to spend a lot of cash in the summer, and I wouldn't be that surprised if QPR go out and spend 30 or 40 million in the summer for me. But there's a lot of players in this team that you don't think are championship players. Rob Green is in this QPR team. Richard Dunn, who used to play for Manchester City, and Matt Phillips, who's linked with Liverpool. Joey Barton, and Newcastle's previous frontman, Loic Remy. So they had a real decent squad going into this year, and they're going to spend a lot more. It's just, to me, whether Harry Redknapp can get them to gel, because they didn't look gelled this year. I think they spent too many players too quickly. And I'm sure Bob will know from the Manchester City, it does take time for these players to gel. Like you said, Joe, the stability. You need these players to come together and play as a unit. You can't just put 11 good players on a pitch that have never played together before and expect them to be a good team automatically. Just before we move up onto the World Cup, I'm just going to give a special mention to Blackburn Rovers, who did actually only finish 2 points out of the playoffs, and we had an horrendous amount of injuries this year. This is a neutral standpoint. I'm just telling you as it comes, but we did have a lot of injuries this year, and there was a lot of changes to personnel. We sacked our manager the year before, so I do expect them to be in the mix for promotion next year. I don't think they'll be in the mix automatically, but if they can keep hold of Jordan Rhodes, who's been linked to numerous Premier League clubs, as I'm sure SirBob will put across the chat, and Blackburn have rejected 2 £8 million bids and said that anything under 12 will be laughed at, and we're going to have a Blackburn Rovers corner from next season, since Joe promised me, and I'll quit the show if he doesn't.
No. I think what we're going to do is we're going to call it Ben's Blackburn Banter.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind what we call it. Yeah.
I'm going to put it in the plan. We're going to put it in probably starting August.
Yeah, we'll put it in. I mean, we'll just follow it. It'll only be a briefing. I won't bore everyone with it. But like I said, I hope that I get to talk about Blackburn at the end of this, because like a few people have said, I mean, it's nice to have the teams that have won the Premier League in the Premier League. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd bite your hand off to be 17th every season. So, it's just it's the place to be. For me, it is still the best league in the world, and there's just such high quality in that league. So I look forward to next season and seeing not only the Championship, but seeing what the newly promoted teams do, and hopefully seeing Burnley break Derby's 10-point record and finish the season with 9 points.
Sir Bob's predicting that Blackburn's going to end up in League One next year.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. It's fun. It's fun for me. It is fun. I mean, I know Bob does follow the Championship a little bit, and this is the thing. We've spoke about it a couple of times on the show before, Joe. That the Championship is the strongest division, second division, second tier, shall we say, in the world.
I agree.
And by a mile. And there's a lot of these teams that would stay and be regular regular top tier teams in other teams in Europe. So other leagues in Europe. Sorry. So it's interesting to give them a mention and a little bit of a preview for the teams you're going to see next year. But like I said, I think for me, QPR have got the best chance just because of the quality in the squad and the money they've got going forward. So for me, look for QPR to probably be safe and Burnley and Leicester to be firmly in the relegation mix.
So let's close out 2013-2014 in Europe. So from now on, moving forward, it's going to be anything that's going to happen in 2014, 2015, and we'll start out probably, like we said, right after the World Cup with a lot of the transfer information. I know we've been chatting here, Sir Bob has been putting a lot of the rumors and a lot of the things into the chat, a lot of the information into the chat. So we'll, obviously next week is going to be a World Cup only show, but moving forward, we're going to definitely be heavy on the transfers, and of course the MLS, which we'll introduce during the summer. So let's head over to the World Cup and preview our last group, which is Group H. So coming next week, if you've been following along with us, we've been previewing. We had started out doing 2 teams at a time. Had to change it up because we fell short on time. We missed a couple of shows due to different things. So we've actually got it nailed down to now where we're going by groups, and this is the last group. This is the last group that we're going to talk about. And before I move on, Ben and SirBob are telling me to send a shout out to Rochdale. So there you go. Hopefully that Ben. Hopefully that suffices. So moving forward, we're gonna look at Group H, and the 4 teams we're gonna preview tonight are Belgium, Russia, Algeria, and South Korea. And Ben, before we move on even further, in our pre-show meetings and chats and emails and tweets and Facebook communications and that sort of thing, you had chosen to do Belgium and Algeria, and I took Russia and South Korea. And doing a little bit of prep work for the two teams I'm going to preview, I now know why you gave me those 2 teams. Because of all the teams in the World Cup, these are probably the teams with the 2 most difficult names to pronounce. Period.
That's what it was. Yeah, I thought I mean, it's 1 a.m. here, so you can't expect me to pronounce them. Surely not.
No, I'm glad to give you the easy names. I didn't look over the Algeria lineup, but I'm sure there's going to be a few difficult ones in there. The other thing is, on these 2 teams, you really don't have anybody that plays in the mainstream European leagues. The Russian team is actually all Russian league players, and I'll get into them in a second. South Korea does have a couple of players that play at Mainz, and just scanning through quickly. I did see Mainz, QPR, who we just talked about. They have a player that's on the South Korean team, but they're not teams that we're normally used to. So even the difficult names out of Belgium, you're going to be able to get because they all play either in England or in Spain or somewhere reasonably that we've talked about them in the past. So let's kick it off. Let's go to Russia. Host of the 2018 World Cup at the moment. Obviously, there's been a little bit of controversy with the 2022 World Cup site within the past day or two, which I'm sure we'll get into during the World Cup time as well. But we'll start out with Russia. Russia currently, according to William Hill, is 66-1 to win the World Cup, so it's quite long. I think that is actually it's a terrible price. I think they're probably a little bit of a longer shot than that to win the World Cup. Some top players to kind of look at on this team. The goalkeeper, Igor Akinfeev from CSKA Moscow, who's a top-flight goaltender. I'm surprised to see him still at Russia. He's, and I was reading up on their profile earlier, and just looking at Akinfeev did not miss a single minute of qualifying and conceded just 5 goals during the course of qualifying. So obviously an excellent goaltender. A couple other players I want to point out. There's a dynamic duo from Dynamo Moscow. Up at the top, they are Alexei Ionov and Alexander Kokorin. Ionov and Kokorin, and just wanted to take a look at CSKA Moscow's team here quickly, as I did have them up on the screen. And actually, my notes are escaping me. I'm sorry. Ionov and Kokorin are from Dynamo Moscow, and I'm looking at the wrong team. Kokorin had 10 goals for them this year, and Ionov was 5th on the team for 5 goals in league play this year. So that's going to kind of be where they're going to be looking at for their goal-scoring prowess. They also have Alexander Kurzakov, who plays at Zenit St. Petersburg, but Zenit is really led by Hulk from Brazil with 17 goals, and Danny from Portugal with 13 goals. Kurzakov only scored 6 goals on the team. He was in 4th place for overall scoring for them. So we're looking at a couple of decent goal scorers. Looking through the team otherwise in the midfield, they have Igor Denisov leading the way in the midfield for them as well. So going to look at their schedule moving forward as soon as I call it up here quickly. They will open the World Cup campaign on June 17th against South Korea, who we'll talk about in a few moments. Then on the 22nd in Rio at the Maracanã, they will be playing Belgium. And then closing out on the 26th of June in Cortiba against Algeria. So personally, without giving away all of our predictions and that sort of thing, I feel like Russia, not necessarily one of the strongest teams, certainly a dangerous team, coached by Fabio Capello. So they definitely have a strong man at the helm. I do expect them to get out of this group and move forward into the knockout stages. But I don't see them doing much more than that. Seeing that this team will have to play the winner of the Group G group, which is going to be either Germany, Portugal, the United States, or Ghana. Pick any one of the four, and it's going to be an issue. So, and Ben, why don't you take us over to Algeria and tell us about this long shot for the World Cup?
Yep, we're going to talk about Algeria. Not really a household name, but we're going to preview them. They're 1,000 to 1 with William Hill to win the World Cup. So if you've got £1 to chuck away, then you can probably have a bet on them. But no, in all seriously, a small team, a small nation. I'll give you the list of the fixtures first. The first game's against Belgium, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later, on the 17th of June. And then it's Korea on the 22nd. And then finally they close the group out with Russia on the 26th. I do expect them to finish bottom of the group, but I'm going to preview them. Firstly, how they qualified, how they got to the World Cup. They had a very mediocre South Africa 2010 and a poor 2013 African Cup of Nations. Algeria missed very few beats, really, on their way to qualifying for the World Cup this year round. They won 5 of their 6 group matches too easily and topped the group, which could have really and possibly should have been a tricky section, really, with Mali, Benin and Rwanda in their qualifying group. So they did well to come out, but once they got into the final playoff round, they were unlucky to draw one of the continent's form teams. Burkina Faso were playing well at the time, and they shocked Africa by finishing second at the 2013 AFCON as well. So in that tie, the first leg they actually lost 3-2 to a late penalty, and looked like it was going to be tough for them, but they just about claimed the place in Brazil in the end. But with a very professional 1-0 win at home, they looked like it was a very professional performance. I did actually watch the highlights of it. I do try and watch some of the African games, and they went through on away goals. As far as the World Cup finals history for Algeria, they've played in a total of 3 World Cup finals. They got off to the best possible start in the 1982 World Cup in Spain, beating West Germany 2-1 in the opening game. Despite a 3-2 victory over Chile in their final game, the earlier 2-0 loss to Austria meant that while level on points with Austria, they were eliminated on goal difference. The second time was in Mexico in 1986, a little bit less memorable. They were drawn in Group D with Brazil, Spain and Northern Ireland, and 2 defeats and a draw left them bottom of the table, and they went on the first flight home. As far as the last World Cup, South Africa in 2010, they were pitted in the group with England, the United States of America and Slovenia, and they lost twice and drew the other fixture, and they went home without a goal to their name. Talk a little bit about the key players. Majid Bahira is a key figure at the back, decent defender, pretty strong really, and he scored the important winner against Burkina Faso, so he's the whole reason they're in the World Cup as well. As far as the creativity in midfield, Sofiane Feghouli is their most attacking and exciting attacking midfielder. He's a bit of pace about him, and he definitely will be any kind of link to them scoring any kind of goals in the World Cup. And the defensive midfielder lesson is the man that they really need to turn up if they're not going to get turned over in this group for me, because he does just sit in front of the back four. As far as qualifying, one of the younger players, Islam Slimani, emerged as the most prolific option in attack, and he looks like he's got something going forward. So maybe it might be a bit too early for him, but like I said, all these players are going to have to perform for them to have any chance of getting anything from this group, and I think even them as a nation are not really expected to come through. So like I said, the best performances for Algeria was 3 group stages Spain 82, Mexico 86, and South Africa in 2010. Their coach is Vahid Halilhodžić, which, lucky it's not too late, I was wouldn't have been able to say that. As far as the former stars go, Mustafa Satini, Rachid Mekaloufi, and this I actually did a bit of research on, so be prepared for this, Joe, about Algeria, because this is my information, little gem for the day. One of their former stars, Lakhdar Belhimi, who is being touted as the best Algerian player of all time and is considered to have invented the blind pass. So, going forward, there's a bit of history behind Algeria, and we'll see how they do in the World Cup, Joe, but I don't suppose they're going to make too much noise.
I don't think so either, but, just looking at this roster on paper, they've got Fawzi Ghulam he's the defender from Napoli, like you mentioned, Feghouli from Valencia. They have Safir Taider from Inter Milan, who plays there as well. They've got Bentaleb from Tottenham, Yabda from Udinese. So this Algerian team, on paper, when you start throwing names out, if it was a team of names, they're actually not terrible. But again, I think you're right. Also, you've got to look at the group that they're in. This is certainly not going to be an easy group for them with a prolific Belgium side and a solid Russian side and even a South Korean side who we're going to preview next here. Unfortunately, they certainly would need a weaker side to move forward, but they're not. I would say they're not a terrible Algerian side. Let's put it that way, Ben. There's plenty of European experience just looking at the names on the roster here. Defenders from Valenciennes, defenders from Reims, obviously Napoli that we just talked about, defender from Watford, Mallorca, Ajaccio, Livorno. I mean, these are all names that are just on the defensive side of the list here. So it's not a horrible side, but I think there's not enough cohesion there to really move forward and make a go of it. Maybe sometime in the future, if these guys can kind of meld together a little bit and continue what they're doing, which is sending their best players to Europe, I think that they'll certainly continue to improve as a side moving forward. So
yeah.
Let's move on to the toughest names in the business here, which is going to be South Korea. South Korea 250-1, and I think that, again, I don't think that they're going to be that good. I think they're probably going to be a little tougher than that for them to win the World Cup. So I wouldn't put any money on them at all. But qualifying for the World Cup, they actually kind of were on a wing and a prayer for a little while, struggling against Australia, who's qualified, and Japan, who's qualified out of the Asian zone. But they managed, and they even ended up losing 2-1 to Lebanon in the third round. But because of that loss to Lebanon, they had fired, and I'm going to try the name, Chow Kwangrai, who was the manager of the team. They ended up firing him for that, and brought on the new manager, which I had his name here in a briefly. Hyung Myung Bo, who's now the new manager, and led them on the way. Again, Ben, we talked earlier about consistency. South Korea, moving forward, was constantly changing their side to try and find a starting lineup that would actually work for them. So, but
they did have. Sorry to interrupt you, Joe. They had Gus Hiddink at one point. He actually took them took a quarterfinal, I believe, semi-final.
That was back in 2002 when it was in Korea and Japan. Yeah. That was one of their greatest sides, and I believe that's right. They finished. I'm just going to take a look here because that was their best finish. They finished in 4th place in 2002. So that was certainly their best finish overall. Just scanning over the team, largely a Korean-based team. But Park Joo-ho from Mainz on the defensive side, with Young Suk-young from QPR, heading the defense for them. Also Hong Jung-ho from Augsburg on the defensive side as well. So they do have a few European-based players. They have in the midfield Son Heung-min from Bayer Leverkusen, Kim Bo-kyung from Cardiff, who we mentioned earlier, and Ji Don Wong from Augsburg in the midfield, and up top, Kujan Chol from Mainz and Park Chu-young from Arsenal, of all places, leading the forwards for them. Again, team that I certainly don't feel is going to move forward without getting into our predictions. But looking at looking into their matches, I'm just going to go back to their to that page with their schedule. They're going to open their World Cup campaign on the 17th against Russia in Cuiabá at the Arena Pantanal. Then on the 22nd, they will be in Porto Alegre against Algeria, which will probably be a decent match to watch given the strength of the two teams. And then they're going to close out their campaign against Belgium in Sao Paulo on the 26th. So, Ben, give us the class of this group, and we're going to close out our World Cup preview.
Yep, the last team we're going to preview before the World Cup starts, and we'll get World Cup fever, is Belgium. They're 14-1 to win the World Cup with William Hill. Their schedule is they're playing Algeria on the 17th of June to open, and then Russia on the 22nd, and then Korea on the 26th. How they qualified? This is a team that's been looking to build something special for a number of years, really. I think we all kind of saw it coming. And they're kind of making this breakthrough that we all expected, a golden generation really seeming capable of, really challenging the best. Les Diables Rouges, or the Red Devils, proved on the road to Brazil 2014, topping Group A, ahead of the likes of Croatia, Serbia and Scotland. Was a pretty easy task for them, almost faultless campaign. They only dropped points in an early draw against Croatia and a second stalemate in the last game when their final place was already assured. They sealed their progress in their penultimate encounter, 2-1 victory in Zagreb. A double from Romelu Lukaku, who I'm going to talk a little bit about later and gets a lot of praise on this show. And he's one of several talents who's added a new dimension to their game since he's moved to the Premier League. As far as their history goes, founding members of FIFA, Belgium have taken part in 11 World Cup tournaments and have been an ever-present force. Were an ever-present force, between 82 and 2002. In 1998, the side coached by Georges Lekins, in his first spell at the helm, came third in their group and made an early exit. In 2002, Robert Wedge's men fell in the last 16 to the eventual winners Brazil. But neither of those teams can come anywhere close to matching the generation that sparkled during Mexico in '86, where they reached the semi-finals before losing to Argentina. As far as the key players go, on paper, Belgium really can call upon an absolute array of stars. All plying their trade in Europe. Europe's most prestigious leagues. The depth of their talent pool is amazing, and Nasser Chadli for one, who was threatening to eclipse the crowd favourite Hazard before Hazard approached anything near his peak. Obviously Lukaku, we were talking about, Kevin De Bruyne, Courtois, and Toby Alderweireld are the latest stars to emerge, while some old guys like Vincent Kompany, Thomas Vermaelen, Alex Witsel, Fellaini, and Stephen Defoe have already established themselves as senior figures, like I said. The danger men for me in the World Cup, the ones that will stand out for me for Brazil, Eden Hazard first. Looks a real menace of a player. I really do think he's coming to his own this season. In a absolutely star-studded Chelsea midfield, he was a standout one for me. Very, very creative. Great dribbler with the ball and capable of winning games on his own. Romelu Lukaku, who we talked about a lot, Joe. 15 goals this year for Everton and 17 goals last year for West Bromwich Albion. He's scoring goals against the best defences in the Premier League, and he, like I said, he's a definite talking point on this show, constant. Even he definitely reminds me of Drogba, real strengthy, tall, with a decent finishing as well. Like I said, real Drogba-esque. For me, he deserves a chance at Chelsea, and if Belgium feel their dark horse potential, which a lot of people are giving him, I do think he'll be a threat at the Golden Boot. And lastly for me, Vincent Kompany, you can't not talk about him. Best defender in the Premier League for me. And what I think is important is he's got the ability to keep this Belgium defence together He's a real leader. You can see that every time he walks out onto the pitch. And obviously he's got experience at the highest level in Europe with City. As far as the best performances go, in Mexico in '86, like I said, 4th place. And a real long while ago in the men's Olympic football tournament in Antwerp in 1920, they actually won that. Obviously, Mark Wilmots is the coach. Just have a touch upon some of the former stars. Enzo Schifo. Zenzo Daniel Schifo is a retired footballer. He used to play for Belgium in midfield. He was a member of the national team, and he appeared in 4 World Cups. Actually, only being one of 3 Belgian players ever to do that. Jean-Marie Pfaff, and the last one, the actual current Belgian boss, Mark Wilmots. Just one last point on Belgium before Joe, if he's got anything to add. They had I know you must have heard about this, the transformative 10-year plan. The technical director of Belgian football, Michel Sablon, who decided that in a radical response to what was happening, and he felt it was needed to the shame. I think he quoted and actually said the shame Belgium had suffered on the grandest stage. I think it broke the back for him and made him make this change when they went out in the group phase in Euro 2000. And Sablon was explicit when he came out, and he sent out his master plan to every leading club and youth hothouse from Anderlecht to Standard Liège, and from Genk to Club Brugge, demanding that all teams from academy level upwards should be forced to adhere to a fast, fluid and adaptable 4-3-3 system. And it looks like he's come out, he said this, and he's gone to the youth systems, Joe, and something seems to be working, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They've done a hell of a rebuilding job for somebody that, at the time of Schifo, moving forward, they kind of had fallen off. Wilmots had them back in the World Cup, but had really kind of fallen off the radar as almost a second-tier European side. But certainly this is a rebirth, and it's funny, they were talking about Belgium on the radio today on Sirius XM, and the people that follow Belgian football they're just falling short of calling this the golden age. I can't see how they can't call this team the golden age. Now just because it's the golden age doesn't mean they have to win the World Cup, but this team is going to create waves. I mean, this team is going to cause problems for people. We look at Thibaut Courtois and the job that he did with Atletico this year. I mean, Ben, there can't be more than 2 or 3 goaltenders in the world that you would take right now over Courtois, to win one game.
Oh yeah.
I can't see anybody at the moment. I would want him in goal for me no matter what. And just to think about it, if Courtois stumbles, they've only got Mignolet to back him up.
This is it. And Mignolet came out today actually and said on the BBC website that there's more to come. He doesn't feel that he's peaking yet.
Oh, it's amazing. Right now the only and it may be a little biased, but this is something that was mentioned on the radio today. The only team that I can think of in the World Cup right now that comes even close to having this type of quality in goal is the United States, where the backup can start for virtually any team. I think Simon Mignolet can start for almost any team in the World Cup right now. Period. I think Brad Guzan could start for almost any team in the World Cup right now. There may be 4 or 5 teams that I would say no. And there are maybe 4 or 5 teams I would say no for Mignolet, but that's the list is very short. So incredible strength in goal on 2 very, very young goaltenders. And then we move forward. Looking at the list on defense, Toby Alderweireld scored the goal for Atletico in against Barcelona to give them the championship. Really, if you think about that, Vincent Kompany, we all know how good he is. We've talked about him at length. You didn't even mention. I don't think you mentioned much of Vertonghen and Vermaelen, who've also been very, very strong in the EPL this year. Daniel Van Buiten plays for Bayern Munich. I mean, another strong core of defenders. We look at the midfield now moving forward. Fellaini, if we had talked about Fellaini last year, Ben, I would have said, Fellaini's going to be the guy. He's going to be this. He's had such a fall from grace when he made that move from Everton to United.
I do think that, sorry to interrupt you, Joe, I do think Fellaini, he was being played a little bit out of position at Man United, so I don't I don't think it's quite as bad.
Well, it's gonna be interesting to see him find his form if he makes it. We talked about Chadley. We've talked about Dembele. They've also got Januzaj and obviously Hazard. Those are four midfielders that I would certainly want to start. Kevin De Bruyne from Wolfsburg is also a very strong midfielder as well. So I think there's so much quality in the midfield that it may be tough for Fellaini to even crack this midfield, Ben. And then of course you talked about Lukaku. And if it's not enough with Lukaku, obviously Benteke is injured and not going to make the World Cup with the Achilles tear. But then they've also got Kevin Morales from Everton, who I thought had a great season this year, Ben. And then Dries Mertens, who for Napoli was probably their best player. Marek Hamsik played very well for them this year. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Gonzalo Higuain played well for them this year, and I'm missing one player who also played well. But Mertens was probably one of the best players at Napoli all season long. Very consistent, dynamic. I mean, this is a guy that if you took Lukaku out and you put Mertens in, they're still going to do very, very well. So this is a back to front team that's very, very strong and very dangerous. You just wonder that if it's going to be experience that defeats them, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it is a bit bad to say dark horses. Really, I know, but Bob thinks they're genuine contenders. They are. I think there's so many good teams at this World Cup. There really, really is. I mean, just to prove the point that I was talking to Joe last week, and I was showing him some silly bookies promotional offer that was like money back if Brazil or Argentina win the World Cup, and it got to the stage where you still couldn't pick, even when you took those two teams out. I do think there's a lot of genuine contenders, for this World Cup. But I do think experience will play a part, and I do think possibly 4 years from now they'll be better equipped than they are now, and would be, even higher up the pecking order. But Belgium will not be a walkover for anyone, and mark my words, no one in this World Cup wants to play Belgium.
No, I think to further your point about in 4 years, Ben, looking at this team is still very young. Vincent Kompany's still very young. Vertonghen and Vermaelen they're getting up in age, but Van Buiten is still a young guy. Outerweeld is still a young guy. Obviously Hazard, Januzaj is what, 19, Ben, if I remember correctly. He might be 20 at best. So we've got at least 2 or 3 more World Cups with Januzaj in him. Dembele's a young guy. That this is a young team. And so they're only going to get better as this experience comes. And, maybe in 4 years, we're talking about the Belgian side as the favorites to win the World Cup.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Also, you got to remember as well, the Euros is 2 years as well. So, for me, once you take out Brazil and you take out Argentina, and you're pulling out some of the real big teams, so they're going to be there or thereabouts. In 2 years, will be more experience. They're going to have that as a stepping stone as well to the next World Cup. So even if we don't see the absolute full potential of them this year, they're going to be somebody to watch. They're really going to be somebody to watch, and you can tell that people are backing them. So obviously, every week I go to take my my wages from Coral, because I play poker professionally, but I go there and every now and then I check on it, and they said, I talked to the guy behind the counter, and he said Belgium have come in from 12s or 14s all the way down to like 9 or 8 since the close season. So everyone is obviously thinking what we're thinking, Joe, and this Belgian team, they're no slouches, and like I said, no one, including Brazil and Argentina, are going to want to play Belgium.
I agree 100%. So Ben, that's going to close out our World Cup preview, and that's going to close that segment for us for 3 years, you think? We'll obviously we'll replace it in a year or so with the Euro preview, but we're going to close it out because starting next week, our show next week on the 9th is going to be all World Cup all the time. We are currently efforting a couple of guests. One that I was hoping was listening tonight, a gentleman by the name of Rob that goes by the name of Arctic Messi on Twitter, at Arctic Messi. If you follow him, or if you've had the chance, definitely start following him. Certainly somebody knows his stuff, and it was funny when I approached him last week and said, hey, would you like to come on as a guest of our World Cup show? he literally asked me why, and the first thing out of my mouth was, because you know your stuff. So I'm hoping to, hopefully he was listening tonight, and hopefully he's able to come on next week. The other one that we're offering at the moment is Alfonso Duro, who we've had on the show in the past. Love to have him come on and talk about Spain and their chances for the World Cup. Also, being in Spain, he may have a little insight as to the Portuguese team, which as an American I'd be highly interested in hearing. And then Ben, the one shot that I haven't tried yet is I'd like to see if we could get Tom Victor, who is a fellow Brit who was recommended by Marco Valerio as a guy that's knowledgeable about football, but also the gambling side of it. And I've started following him on Twitter, and he's an excellent follow as well, especially when it's when the EPL's in season. He's a great follow to hear about some of the things he has to say. So. Again, planning a big show for next week, or trying to at least. So, Ben, I'm going to let you take a few minutes off here because I'm going to get into the MLS preview and scores. So I'm going to start out with the scores starting back on May 26th, which was last Monday, which was Memorial Day, our show that we had cut a little short and kind of cut this segment out because we were efforting the World Series of Poker draft. So. On Monday the 26th, the LA Galaxy defeated the Philadelphia Union 4-1. San Jose Earthquakes over the Dynamo 3-0. On Wednesday the 28th, we had Sporting KC and the Red Bull to a 1-1 draw. On Thursday, we had Chivas losing to the Portland Timbers at home 2-0. On Saturday, we had quite the drubbing. I did get to hear a portion of this game, but I didn't get to hear all of it. Seattle Sounders 4-0 over Real Salt Lake. And Toronto FC, to SirBob's delight, with a 3-2 victory over the Columbus Crew. On Sunday, Montreal Impact 2-0 over the Revolution. DC United 1-0 over Sporting Kansas City. FC Dallas losing at home 2-1 to the Earthquakes. Philadelphia Union 3-0 over Chivas. And the Galaxy drawing the Fire 1-1. And in a couple of games that happened earlier today, the Colorado Rapid beating the Houston Dynamo 3-0 at home. And in a barn burner to Troy's delight, we have the Vancouver Whitecaps defeating the Portland Timber, a team that we're actually going to be previewing tonight, 4-3. Just looking at that game and the scoring quickly, Maximilio Urruti in the 3rd minute scoring for Portland, only to be outdone by 2 penalty kicks for Pedro Morales, one in the 16th minute and one in the 26th. A goal by Eric Hurtado in the 45th minute and a goal by Jordan Harvey in the 49th minute, giving the Whitecaps a 4-1 lead. Gaston Fernandez scoring in the 77th minute, and Will Johnson, who Sir Bob had mistaken for another player a few weeks ago, scoring in the 86th minute to make it a little closer, but a 4-3 victory for Vancouver overall. Shots on this one, 23-18 in favor of Vancouver, 11-8 on target in favor of Vancouver as well. The Timbers hitting the post once, and the possession going Portland's way, 55-45. So, Ben, it feels like I haven't done something like that in a while. Give the breakdown and possession of an actual match. So that's kind of something a little different for us in the past few days. So let's go into the tables quickly. Excuse me, on the Eastern Conference week, and again, the schedules have been varied, so teams like Toronto have only played 10 matches, whereas teams like FC Dallas have played 15. So take all of these point totals with a grain of salt. But the New England Revolution leading the Eastern Conference, 13 matches, 23 points. DC United in second place, 13 matches, 21 points. Sporting Kansas City, last year's champion, in third, 14 matches, 19 points. Houston Dynamo in fourth place, 17 points in 15 matches. Toronto FC, 16 points in 10 matches. Ben, just quickly on Toronto, I forgot to check before we went on the air. Jermaine Defoe, did he get asked to come onto the England side, or is he listed as an alternate?
I believe he was listed as an alternate.
Right,
I'll double check for you while you're going through it, but I do believe it was an alternate, yeah.
All right, sounds good. Moving on, sixth place, Columbus Crew, 13 matches, 16 points, losers of 4 of their last 6. The Red Bull in 7th place, 15 points, 14 matches. Philadelphia Union, 14 points, 15 matches. The Chicago Fire in 9th place, 13 points on 12 matches. And the Montreal Impact, 10 points on 12 matches. Going over to the Western Conference, the Seattle Sounders currently leading all teams, 29 points on 14 matches, winners of 4 of their last 6. Real Salt Lake in second place, especially after that loss this weekend, 24 points on 13 matches. Colorado in third place, 21 points on 13 matches. Vancouver Whitecaps, Troy, 20 points on 12 matches. FC Dallas in fifth, 18 points on 15 matches. The Galaxy, 16 points on 11 matches, getting more and more scoring out of Landon Donovan lately since he's been listed as an alternate for the U.S. team. The San Jose Earthquake, 16 points on 12 matches, and the Portland Timbers, also 16 points, 14 matches. And last place, Chivas, 10 points on 13 matches. So those are the tables. Let's look at a few teams here. The first team I want to bring up is the Portland Timber. Again, losers today to the Vancouver Whitecaps 4-3. This team was kind of the surprise, and according to SirBob, Defoe's been left out. And it says if Harry Redknapp was the coach, he wouldn't have left Defoe out. And just looking at the quotes real quick in the chat.
I must admit, I think I would have took Defoe over Welbeck, really. But it's my opinion. My brother insists that Welbeck is really, really good. I don't think that Welbeck has the ability in pressure situations for me.
Well,
I don't think he's going to start, but still, I would. You know, I have these recurring nightmares. It used to be Heskey through 1-on-1 in the World Cup final, but now it feels like it's Danny Welbeck through 1-on-1 in the World Cup final.
Ben, I've got to say, just offhand, I feel like Danny Welbeck is sort of a dumbed down version of oh boy, his name is escaping me. He plays with Suarez, Liverpool, not Sterling, Sturridge, Daniel Sturridge. To me, it just seems like Sturridge is a little better with the ball. Sturridge is a little faster. But in essence, they kind of play the same style. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben. But I
mean, they play a similar role off the striker. But for me, Danny Sturridge is a class above Daniel Welbeck. I mean,
I agree.
Daniel Welbeck is not, he's not awful. But I mean, I see him play for Manchester United in the team, and He doesn't look that quality level for me.
I just
not a Champions League level.
I just feel like since Welbeck and Sturridge are the same player, it would have been better.
Why would you take them both? Yeah,
right, exactly. Where Defoe.
But this is it for me. I mean, Danny Sturridge and Wayne Rooney can play off, and Ricky Lambert can play up top. So why would you not have 2 that can play up top and 2 that can play off?
And that would be Defoe.
Yeah,
I agree. So. Getting back to the Timbers, again, Caleb Porter, like I said, kind of did a bang-up job last year with them, really taking what amounts to an expansion team deep into the playoffs last year. Led in goal scoring by Gaston Fernandez and Maximilio Urruti, who scored that goal earlier today, 6 goals each. Will Johnson in third place with 3 goals, the Canadian. Their last 3 matches were losers to the Timbers today. I'm sorry, losers to the Whitecaps today, 4-3. Prior to that, they had defeated Chivas 2-0 on the 29th, and they had defeated the Red Bull on the 25th. Both those matches coming on the road. So again, a team, according to SirBob's simulation, outperforming where they should be currently this time of year. So, and they're a team that I like to root for. Definitely a rabid fan base, Ben. If you've ever had a chance to watch a Portland Timbers match on TV, if you've ever seen one of their home matches, certainly a rabid fan base. Great support out there in Portland, and I think this team is going to do well. In the future, it's going to be interesting to see how well they can progress. Picking up a couple players here and there. It really seems like they're getting a lot of players coming into the MLS from other places. It'd be nice to see them pick up a piece here or there. So that would be the Portland Timbers. Moving on to the Colorado Rapids. Looking at them quickly, they are losers of 3 of their last 6. Most recently, they had defeated the Montreal Impact 4-1. Prior to that, they were losers to Real Salt Lake on the 18th. And then losers to Chivas on the 11th, last place lowly Chivas. They're led in the goal scoring department by Vicente Sanchez with 5 goals, and Deshaun Brown, the Jamaican, adding 4 goals in second place, with three players in third place on scoring for them: Jose Mari, Dylan Powers, and Kamani Hills. So their next 2 matches coming up on the 5th, they'll be playing the Chicago Fire, and that'll be at home in Denver. And then on the 8th, they'll be playing at FC Dallas, who's also one of the stronger teams moving forward this year. So that's our quick little look at the Columbus Crew. The Colorado Rapids. And lastly, now that I've mentioned them, the Columbus Crew. Just to give you an idea, the Columbus Crew is currently sitting in 6th place. This is a previous MLS champion, led in goal scoring by Federico Higuain with 6 goals, 5 assists, and Argentinian. Jairo Arrieta in second place with 3 goals, and then they have 3 players with 2 goals each: Justin Miram, Ethan Finlay, and Bernardo Honor. Their most recent form, they are actually losers of 4 of their last 6. Most recently losing to Toronto FC on Saturday 3-2 on the road. Prior to that, defeating the Chicago Fire 2-0, drawing the Portland Timbers 3-3, and then they've gone on a stretch of 3 losses to the Vancouver Whitecaps, Houston Dynamo, and Sporting Kansas City. Coming up for the Columbus Crew, we have matches on the 5th against Real Salt Lake in Columbus. And we also have a match on the 7th against DC United. That'll be in Washington. Again, this is a team with some history to it. It's going to be interesting to see them, to see how they fare moving forward in the league. In 6th place, kind of in the middle of it all here, but certainly when you're losing 4 of your last 6, going to be difficult, especially when you're tied on points with Toronto, and Toronto's played 3 less games than you. So. And the other teams that have played 13 matches, Ben, like the Revolution and DC United, are all 5 points or better ahead of them. So, it's gonna be tough for the Columbus Crew to return that form, to kind of turn the corner and move forward, or they're gonna find themselves being caught by teams like the Red Bull and just being outpaced by Toronto and teams with some quality to them. So. One of the other things I want to bring up, and Sir Bob had brought it up in the chat earlier in the show, Ben, and this is something where I wanted to bring you back in, is there's obviously an expansion football club that starts play in 2015. I'd have to go back through the chat, but I think it's 2015, and it's the New York City Football Club, which has ties, I believe it's co-owned by both the New York Yankees and Manchester City, Ben. Okay. They signed their first player earlier today, a guy you might have heard of, a guy by the name of David Villa. you might have. I've heard he's played in Europe recently, and I think he plays forward, Ben. But now we're also on the heels of Frank Lampard, who has announced he's leaving Chelsea.
What was the name of the team, sorry, Jack?
This is New York City Football Club, NYCFC. So you might go ahead.
That's correct.
Yeah. So your thoughts, and this kind of goes back to developing a league, Ben. Obviously, the MLS, by all intents and purposes, is a young league. It was started, I believe, they're in their 18th season. They started right after the World Cup was in the United States in '94. And to me, I hate to see a team go the way of the old NASL in the late 70s and early 80s, where they brought in players like Franz Beckenbauer and Pele and Giorgio Chinaglia and all these huge European names, but these guys were all well past their prime, and it was kind of an old folks' home of world football. And my worry was something like that would happen. Obviously, we've got Thierry Henry playing at the Red Bull. We've got Jermaine Defoe, who's actually not that old. I believe Ben Defoe is 31. He might be 32 at the oldest, but certainly not over the hill by any stretch. Going to Toronto FC recently. Now we've got David Villa and we've got Frank Lampard coming to New York. We've got David Beckham as an owner in Miami. Rumor has it that when they start playing in 2 years, they're looking seriously at Zlatan Ibrahimovic coming over and playing for them. So a couple of thoughts, Ben. I want to know your thoughts on guys like Frank Lampard and David Villa making the move to the United States to MLS, And do you find, or do you think that this could potentially turn into a new NASL where we're getting an old folks home again? Or do you see some of the younger talent? We just talked about the Belgians and their young side. Do we see maybe some of that younger talent making the jump to the United States and possibly playing over here?
I think what you'll see like parent clubs link up. This is my personal opinion. So I was just saying to Bob in the chat. You'll see like a lot of parent clubs that will have relations with possibly English clubs or other European clubs, and I think you'll see players, maybe on the fringe of first team, maybe a season away from starting in the team, and I think you'll see some of them going out there on loan, and it will kind of be like what they do with the second tier in England. They'll go out there on loan. If they're decent enough, they'll come back. But if they're not quite Premier League material, then they may well be sold to the American teams, because obviously there's going to be money there. I mean, the one thing you can guarantee from Americans, from sports ground, is there's always money pumped in. Mm-hmm. So if we have these players that don't quite make Premiership first teams, for argument's sake, but are still really good players, then they may be brought in by the American teams, and then I think it will kind of go down that line. And like I said before on the show, I think a lot of money will be pumped into the youth systems of the teams as well. I think you'll have high schools investing more into soccer. I hate calling it soccer, but you know what I mean. And that, for me, I can only see the MLS growing and growing. I mean, my opinion would be that when I'm 60, 65, and my kids have got kids, that the MLS will be a major brand with a real strong league, and it won't be a European Champions League anymore. It might even be less time. It may be 20 years or so, and expanding it to a world Champions League, something along those kind of lines. But I could definitely see parent clubs and fringe players being loaned out, possibly in a view to buy, should we say, by a lot of the MLS clubs, yeah.
And I think we're also seeing that right now, because obviously this New York City Football Club is linked with Man City, and the discussion for Frank Lampard right now is that he's announced he's leaving Chelsea, but after the World Cup he really has nowhere to play for virtually 6 months. The World Cup will end at in the middle of July. He'll go from July until February without having a team, and then he'll come over to NYCFC in February and start his campaign there. But with that long of a layoff, they're worried about it. So I believe right now what they're trying to work out is a 6-month contract with Man City for Frank Lampard to come over, play 6 months there, and then in February migrate over to the United States. And I think they're probably looking to do something similar with David Villa as well. Because the worst thing you want to do is have these guys take 8 months off, 7 months off, and just do nothing, and have nowhere to play competitively. Yeah. I think probably the best thing to do would be to sign them and then loan them somewhere for the 6 months and then recall them. Now, Ben, the one other thing that I want to bring up in terms of the MLS versus some of these other leagues is the timing. And it frustrates me to no end. I personally still think, and I know it's going to be it would be difficult to do, but I think MLS should go to a European schedule, which would basically be a FIFA calendar. I think the worry is that when the MLS is playing matches in October, November, especially with the northern teams that we have here in New England, we have them in Chicago, obviously Seattle and Portland, but then we move north of the border to Canada, to the Vancouvers, the Montreals, and the Torontos of the world. They're worried about weather, Ben. It's not uncommon to see snow on the ground in any of these cities in late October. And I think the worry is that these guys are going to be playing in the middle of a snowstorm. Now, my response to that would be to unbalance the schedule for these guys. Play your Toronto matches and play your Montreal matches in the Aprils, in the Marches, Aprils, and Mays of the league year, and then play your Miamis and play your Dallases and play your Houstons in the Novembers and Decembers and Januaries. This way you unbalance the schedule, you go to once a week, you get a 30-35 match season in, and you still, but you move yourself to that FIFA calendar. And right now, what some of these teams are going through, For example, Real Salt Lake. Real Salt Lake is missing probably the best goaltender in MLS right now in Nick Raimondo, who is the third goalie for the U.S. national team. They're also missing Kyle Beckerman in the defensive midfield, who's gone over to the U.S. national team. Sporting Kansas City missing Graham Zusi, who is over with the national team. We talk about Michael Bradley leaving Toronto FC to go over and play for the World Cup, and Clint Dempsey, who's gone over as well to play. So, 10 of the 23 players on the U.S. national team are in MLS. So these are 10 of the top quality players you pull out of the league 13 matches into the season, and they're gone. I just think that it doesn't make sense to be off of the FIFA schedule when we have so many FIFA events that happen. Ben, what are your thoughts of trying to move the schedule to a more FIFA conforming schedule?
For me, I think they've kind of got to do two things really. I mean, I don't know what the schedules are for like the NFL and the NHL and stuff, and whether they're doing that, and whether they think there'll be a clash. But can they not use undersoil heating and roof it? And yeah, I know we don't really get much snow and really really cold weather, but in England really, but in the northern parts of England and going into Scotland they do, and they have, obviously, it's an expense and it would have to be an investment outlay, but they have undersoil heating that's turned on, the morning of the game, and so no snow can settle. And then they could play straight on the pitch. But, Troy's saying about the NHL. I don't know whether they did that because of that. They don't want it to clash, because the difference is in England, there's not really any sports that are anywhere near as big as football. So it really, most people, if they're into any other sport, it's uncommon. Whereas 75-80% of people follow football in England. So I don't know, maybe put the heating on and do it in the off season. But I do think that the thing that you're talking about with the World Cup, with the players going away, I do think that's going to have a major difference on the MLS, and it is unfair to a lot of the teams. So they probably should get them on a European schedule, and I don't know, maybe move some of the other games around from the NHL and the NFL, or change the time so that people can follow their soccer team and their American football team or hockey team or whatever it may be.
Well, I think the reason they actually started out in the summer like they have is twofold. One, obviously taking advantage of the better weather, so you would have less cancellations of matches. But two, it would put it up against baseball, and in this country, football is king, and you would start your soccer season or your English football or European football season right at the start of the American football season, and to have the two competing sports would be very, very difficult because, like I said, the NFL is king, and it would certainly be difficult to kind of unseed them. So I see the logic when they did it at the time to kind of not go up against those big juggernauts of the multi-billion-dollar NFL and that sort of thing. But I think that the football in general has evolved in this country to the point where they could do it. And I also think that if they did it, it would be great to kind of come off the heels of the World Cup, maybe wait 3 or 4 weeks, then start your American, your MLS season and lead into it. It might be something that they're not going to do now, but I think hinging on what happens with the Qatar World Cup, I think it might be something that they should take opportunity with at the end of the Russian World Cup. Possibly make the change somewhere around that time. So, Ben, let's wrap up the MLS there. And now that we've talked about Frank Lampard and David Villa, obviously as these transfers and these signings and these loan deals happen during and after the World Cup, then we'll obviously dig much deeper into them. So. I know SirBob all night has been posting about Balotelli to Arsenal among some of the other potential moves, and I'm sure we're going to have a summer full of transfers that we're going to talk about. But at the moment, let's just be happy to say that everybody is rumored to go to Manchester United, and everybody is rumored to go to PSG, at the moment. So, and then we'll
This is it. I actually heard a rumor earlier that before the Man City one come through, that Lampard was even going to Blackburn. So I think there's just people on my Facebook having fun. But yeah, for now, everyone probably is going to PSG, and I can guarantee you there'll be a lot of not lesser players. That's the wrong word to say, but a lot of the lower bottom half Premier League players are going to QPR, because I would be, like I said earlier, I think they're just going to chuck a load of money at some players and just offer silly 40-50 grand contracts just to try and buy safety.
Well, yesterday in my match, I played. I had a match yesterday morning, and I scored a goal in the match, and I got a call from Sir Alex. So I'm just saying. so with that in mind,
well, as long as he's offering you decent money, Joe, just quit the show and just go and do it.
Honestly, if Sir Alex called me, that would be decent money. So
this is it. Yeah.
But all right, so now that let's go talk about the good Manchester team. Let's take it off with our closing segment of every week, Sir Bob's Man City Corner. And before we start it, Ben, I just want to mention to Sir Bob that next week there will be no Man City Corner. There will also be no MLS coverage next week because, like I said, we're doing an all World Cup show. So that's how we're going to close it out. So take us to the last Man City Corner for a couple weeks, Ben.
I decided upon the rumour that is Dzeko to Inter. I don't really think that this rumour holds too much source, but we'll talk about it. I'll put the link into the chat as well. So if Troy and Bob want to have a little read of it, they can. Essentially, it's just Inter Milan president Eric Foran saying that he's keen on Edin Dzeko, but he fears he might be out of the price range. They said that he's been linked with him for some time, and I do think that Dzeko maybe is getting a little bit frustrated that he's not playing first choice, shall we say. But I think he's done enough this season, and he's coming at a real important time during the season that he may start a berth next season and get a starting berth even, and maybe Negredo gets dropped to the bench. But even so, even if he does want to move, like the Inter Milan for it said, they can't afford to buy him. Even if Manchester City said, okay, we're going to sell him, the bid that would needed to be to prize Dzeko away from Manchester City, to me, feels like it would be beyond what Inter Milan could and should pay. I mean, I was going to ask you a few questions about him, Joe. Firstly, do you think that he'll keep Negredo out? Do you think that he's number 2 now and Negredo should be free based upon what we saw last season?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've kind of, for some reason, Negredo had fallen off of form, and I think Negredo really fell off of form it coincided with Aguero's hamstring problems that plagued him all season. And Dzeko really, obviously took advantage of the opportunity, stepped up and did some goal scoring for them, where Negredo kind of fell off of it a little bit. And I think at this point Pellegrini's much happier with Dzeko, moving forward. So I certainly think Dzeko is going to be the number 2, moving forward there for them. I don't see, unless he has a serious fall from form, and we'll have to see how he does with Bosnia this year in the World Cup to see if he can continue on his pace. Because if he can, then I think the future is very bright at Man City for him. And again, I don't think he's going to be going to Inter because Eric Torhier has no idea what he wants to do. I mean, he butchered the Freddy Guarin deal with Mirko Vucinic. It seems to me like he's a little wishy-washy, and he may be interested in Dzeko, but like the title on the story says, I think Dzeko's going to be out of his price range moving forward. So,
yeah, I don't think I need to worry too much about it. One thing I would say though is, obviously Aguero, is a given he's going to start, but when it's Negredo and Dzeko, and it's good to have the competition there, but still at the same time, both of those strikers start. For me, I do think it was a bit, okay, the Negredo went a bit out of form last season, but, it's the old adage that form's temporary, class is permanent. I like Negredo. I think he's a decent striker. He's strong and he's a good finisher. And I don't think you can just say no to him just because he had a bit of an off patch from one season. So to me, it's silly to sell Negredo. But at the same time, surely they're not stupid and they can see that one of those guys is going to be sat on the bench and is probably only going to get 20 minutes a game for a good proportion of the season. And Joe, if a bid does come in, I'd imagine that Pellegrini, obviously after the World Cup, they're going to probably knock on his door and be like, well, what is kind of, what's happening, because they're getting appearances, performance bonuses and stuff like this as well, goal bonuses, no doubt. If someone comes in, a big team, I mean, it's going to have to be a big team with a decent wage bracket, but if someone comes in, could you see one leaving Joe, Negredo or Dzeko?
Yeah, I could see Negredo going, and that was going to lead me to my next thought was that, does Man City look to possibly sell Negredo while they can still get a good price for him and maybe fill in with a different striker? That would certainly be interesting to me. I mean, we look at just looking at some of the things SirBob put in chat. One of the rumors or possible signings he put was Didier Drogba going to Juventus. Now, maybe you find a striker like that, not necessarily over the hill, but somebody who is not of the same quality, but would be a great change of pace striker for Man City. That you could have for a cheaper price. Not that they need to save money, but with the FIFA fair play penalties that are looming for them, maybe it's something where they sell Negredo, they get some money for him, they bring in a lesser striker, live with that for a year, and then move forward with a better striker. You could always see something like that happening.
Yeah, I do think it's the problem for all the top clubs. I think once you get to this level where you want to be the absolute best, and you've got 11. Once you get that real strong 11, then you're always going to want backup for those 11s that are just not quite as good. But then those not just quite as good are such world-class players that they want to be playing football. So this is where team management comes in for me. This is where the manager makes a difference, because this manager, regardless of what team, Pellegrini in this case, but regardless of the team, like I said, needs to keep this striker happy, whether it's giving them all the cup games or whether it's giving them maybe 30 minutes instead of 20 minutes or whether it's extra bonuses, a bit of extra work, just something so that they don't feel like they are second fiddle even though they are. It's a bit of a psychological game, and this is where managers make their money for me. My dad always says, it's silly when teams lose, the managers get sacked, and it's not the players that get punished. And my dad's not a football fan, and he does talk rubbish, but that's not the point. But this is true. This for me is where managers make their money, because I personally think it depends. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what Negredo's on, and I'm not sure where the financial fair play would come in exactly, and how close it's going to be for Man City and what they need to do. But who and at what level of striker can you get in to do that? And if you do that, and you play, say, Dzeko and Aguero for argument's sake, then what do you do? Because then surely Jovetic gets moved up, and then if he's not as good as Jovetic, do you really need a fourth choice striker? And and so on and so forth. This third kind of striker position, not so much the fourth choice striker, because a lot of people, those kind of fourth choice strikers, would rather sit on the bench at a decent club and get a little bit of time and earn more money than they would go and play, maybe somewhere around the relegation zone as a first choice striker. So, but it's this third choice striker position for all the big clubs that you nearly, you kind of need to get right. And this is what we were saying earlier about I forgot his bloody name. The wannabe Sturridge.
Danny Welbeck.
Well, Danny Welbeck. This is it. Yeah. Sorry, it's late. It's 2 a.m. Yeah. Danny Welbeck. This would be this is Man United's third choice striker, and it's Danny Welbeck, and for me that's not good enough level. But at the same time, would anyone better than Danny Welbeck want to sit on the bench? It's really hard to deal with, and I wouldn't want that headache if it was me, because you've got to try and keep that person there and keep them happy, and the only way you're going to do that is to give them minutes or give them money. And if the financial fair play comes in and you can't give them money, then what do you do about it? But me personally, I would keep Negredo, because I don't think you're going to get anyone as good as Negredo to come in as a third choice striker that's happy, and I don't think that Negredo's unhappy at Manchester City.
I agree. Well, let me ask you this: Sir Bob brings up Jovetic in the chat. What do you think about Jovetic then? Is it?
I did just say Jovetic. That's what I said.
I'm sorry, I missed
I was
that.
saying I said if he goes, then Jovetic gets moved up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think. I must admit, I didn't see loads and loads of him before that. He looks, there's definite potential there, and he looks like a good player. So this is the thing, but then it gets even deeper. So now you have Jovetic and Negredo.
Mm-hmm.
So then now the story expands and unravels. So now not only which one of those wants to be third choice striker, but which one of those strikers, might not even make the bench, or definitely knows that unless something drastic happens. There has to be a big injury just for them to make the bench. And these kind of players are not going to want to do that, not really, unless, once again, you chuck a load of money at them. And do you really want to chuck a load of money at a fourth choice striker?
No, never. So it's something that they'll have to make a decision, because then you could easily see somebody like Jovetic, who does have some potential to want to move on to a side, even a side that's being promoted in one of the leagues, where you might be able to get a few extra dollars, but you're going to be the man, and you're going to be able to play and improve and possibly.
This is it. This is it. I think I don't know. For me, I'd probably keep Negredo. And although Jovetic's got the potential, I don't know if he's going to stay. But I mean, if they can keep him there, then obviously you want to keep him there, because as many good potential players as you can have on your books that you can afford to keep, you obviously want to keep.
Oh, absolutely. So, Ben, let's cue up the closing music and talk about next week quickly. So let's see here. So that's that, and I'm just going to turn it down a little bit, because I'm sure it's going to be a little bit loud. So, so next week, Ben, is obviously all World Cup all the time. And you and I will have a quick little meeting here in a moment, but we're probably going to obviously go through each group. We're going to make our predictions in each group. We're going to pick a World Cup champion. And we'll do this, Ben, you and I, just like we normally do. We're not going to talk about it until we actually talk about it. So,
yeah.
And I also want to invite the listeners to go to ESPN FC, go to their fantasy section. There is a low-limit football bracket prediction center that you can go on and basically make the predictions to compete against us. Ben and I will be making sure that we get our brackets up there, and then we'll see how we all do. There are no prizes on the line; it's just for fun, but it'll give us something to talk about over time.
Actually, sorry, Joe. Just before we go, I'm not trying to cut you up, but my girlfriend actually brought home a pool, the same kind of thing for the brackets, and apparently she's it's £2 in or something, and like £50 for the first prize. So now there's pressure on it, because she said she wants some spending money for a holiday, so now it becomes a bit more pressurized for me.
And Troy's saying you get a shirt from John as a prize, and that's why I don't want to promise it. So
you won't. Trust me, Troy. You'll never get a shirt from John. It's
you keep waiting for it. But we're going to talk about each, like I said, we're going to talk about each team. Somebody won the EPL. That's called Man City. Thanks, Bob. We'll give you another pat. Still not as good as Juventus. And we're also going to talk about the injury plague that's been going on. We're going to talk about teams that are going to be missing great players. Like I said, we'll make our predictions. We may throw in a little Qatar controversy that's coming up, and go from there. So, Ben, any closing thoughts real quick?
I found out that Belgium are not just not just dark horses; they're actual legitimate choices for the World Cup. So we're going to follow those, and it's going to be an exciting World Cup. And I hope that everyone that's listening enjoys herself, and hopefully we're just going to get out to a wide audience, because we enjoy doing it, and we enjoy it even more if people listen.
I agree. So tune in next week. Ben and I will decide the time, and we'll post it on Twitter. Again, I'm Joe Yu.
And I'm Ben the Machine.
And that was episode 30 of Low Limit Football. Join us on Thursday night at 9 p.m. for Low Limit Poker Radio. Thanks for joining us again, guys, in the chat, Sir Bob and Troy, and good night.
Thanks for listening, everybody.